Today's episode is sponsored by Puffin Books UK.
Good morning, campers. Welcome to Radio Camp Half-Blood, a Percy Jackson read-along podcast. I am your host, Zach.
And I'm B.
And this week, we kind of had a little sheep of doom. Oh my god, it's so
sheep of
fluffy. Oh my god, there's just wool everywhere. Oh no.
We were talking off mic about how hilarious it is that yesterday I went to the Sheep and Wool Festival. So I did, in fact, encounter a lot of sheep and goats and other types of creatures like that. None of them were man-eating or piranha-like in their diet, but they were very soft and cute.
Yes, so this week we read Chapter 14, We Meet the Sheep of Doom. It sounds like a Goosebumps book, if you come to think of that title.
It does sound very Goosebumps-esque.
But I really enjoyed this chapter a lot. I liked a lot of the things with the sheep. I enjoyed a lot of the things with Polyphemus and kind of having we're going to make stew and mango chutney. I want to know what a mango is. Things like that I thought were really clever and really funny, but still weaving in the pattern of, hey, we're going to talk about Odysseus and nobody. And I really enjoyed that in this chapter.
Yeah, that was a clever little addition. At first, I just thought it was a play on how kind of gullible he was. You could say it's nobody, and he would still kind of be tricked by it. But then to bring back the thing about how Odysseus called himself nobody to trick Polyphemus the first time when he stabbed him in the eye. That is one of the few Greek myth things that I did know, is that he called himself nobody.
Yeah, and much like Annabeth, Odysseus had hubris. And at the end, when they're sailing away, he tells him his actual name. Thus, Polyphemus curses Odysseus because he's also a son of Poseidon, and thus blowing him out of course again. So this is a really interesting juxtaposition we have here with having, hey, we can't beat him with strength, we're going to use it with our mind, we're going to use trickery. And I really enjoy that with this chapter is, yes, it's a very short chapter, but it's they're not going to take this the bronze way of just we're going to do this with muscle. We're going to use our brains. Luckily, we have Athena, goddess of wisdom and strategy on our team with Annabeth.
Well, we've talked about this a few times on the show, how I appreciate those kinds of encounters with monsters in the Percy Jackson books is when it involves something other than sort of a slapdash, we're going to pull out Riptide and fight with swords and shields and bow and arrow and whatever. Any of that kind of action I could do without. I don't hate it necessarily. It is well served in the narrative a few times, but it can be repetitive if a children's book tends to depend on and then we encounter another enemy and we have another sort of perfunctory physical fight that ends in triumph, as it always does. I like a kind of more we're gonna use our brains to trick him in a clever way, or a workaround of escaping somehow that doesn't just involve physical force.
Yeah, because it's really boring when you have they fight and they encounter and fight again, and Percy used Riptide. That's not fun and engaging like people might think it is until you get into the chemistry of writing a fight scene and having the most important thing about writing a fight scene, which I've gone to a lot of seminars about this. I think I've talked about this before, is there's a lot of things. One is kind of geography of the location, and two is the general action. If you can't picture either or, the fight scene falls apart into smithereens. And it works really well with action also in movies when you know the geography. Give an example, in Indiana Jones and the Raiders of the Lost Ark, when you have the truck scene, which I consider the greatest action scene, you know the geography, you know the stakes, and you know that everything that Indy does, he's in mortal danger.
Well, also we've talked about this, personally, I prefer action when it's in a visual medium, because then I don't have to do the extra work of kind of trying to have this D&D map in my brain of being okay, so then the monster strikes here, and here's the cave, and there's steps over here, and this person, they drop their weapon, all that kind of mental gymnastics you have to do to picture what's happening. It kind of takes you out of it in a way, and you don't feel as immersed. While any kind of intellectual oh, we're gonna trick him with wordplay, that's way more my speed. Also, I feel if I were in this scenario, which I'm glad I'm not, and I'm glad I'm immortal, but if I was a demigod, then I probably would lean more towards clever trickery and I don't know, wordplay to try and escape dangerous situations than just being sword time.
Yeah, I'm kind of the same way. I mean, I guess we kind of have a bias because we enjoy more witty banner. We enjoy encounters that or kind of like intellectual and kind of like figuring out a different way than just, might versus light type of scenario. Whereas I'm sure there's a lot of people that enjoy reading Percy Jackson and want to have more fight scenes because, you know what? Swords are really cool, except when you use them the wrong way. What I mean by that is the lightsaber in Star Wars, the first three, the trilogy, they only use it like very, very small times, but those are what people love. Same as the proton packs in Ghostbusters. They only use it for, I think, a minute of footage throughout the whole movie, but that is the coolest thing. Then you look at, new remakes, you look at all that stuff, and it's boring because they use it like willy-nilly, whereas here it's the same way with having like any weapon that you use and overuse can get boring really quickly. That's why you have like the mystique of using Riptide, which quintessentially is a really cool weapon because it comes back to you in the form of a pen. It's for a kid. Kids with weapons is an interesting thing when you have with, like, especially with swords and stuff, because it's very much like King Arthur. That's how you prove your worth. It's more, I guess, when you have sword play, there's a lot more like personal connection or I guess personal combat.
Right, it's not just he pulls out a gun. Can you imagine?
Whoops.
Speaking of Indiana Jones, can you imagine if Percy just pulled out a gun and shot Polyphemus in the face?
You know what? I'd actually pay to see that, especially I don't understand why demigods don't like have like celestial bronze bullets. But then again, that's a whole new argument of giving kids guns.
Yeah, then you're like getting into weird territory. I think if it's like a more ancient weapon, like a sword, you can kind of suspend your disbelief a little bit, but once you get into like modern weapons, like, oh, well, where do we end? Can we have celestial bronze drones? Like, where, like, it's a lot.
What are you talking about, B? We're gonna have a celestial bronze Apache helicopter just completely made out of celestial
just
bronze.
Like crashing into things.
Yeah, or like a celestial bronze Tomahawk missile just blows up a monster. You know what? We've solved the problem. This is what we should do. More guns equals more fun.
On the CSS Birmingham, they had celestial bronze cannonballs, but even that's an older technology. It is like a projectile, so it's not as ancient as like swords from ancient Greece, but it is not as like threatening as a handgun or something. That would be just really strange, and it's interesting how we're kind of like accepting of certain weapons with children and not others.
Well, I mean, how funny would it be if like they confront Luke again and Percy Jackson just pulls out a handgun and just shoots him, and it's just the most anticlimactic thing in existence?
Yeah, well, that's also why it works in like these kind of fantasy YA settings, where if everyone did have like a higher power of weaponry, the fights wouldn't look as, I don't know, interesting or complicated, and it wouldn't involve as much skill. It would just be like, well, I'm going to aim this at a thing, and then it will die.
Well, also the point of it would probably be that you would lose, I think, kind of the mystique of having like this urban fantasy of having the old ways meeting the new ways. And we could easily talk about it, but when it comes to like writing fight scenes, when it comes to like writing a bunch of things, I actually enjoy swordplay a little more. Again, because it's more personal, and especially when you have like things that are such steeped in Greek culture, they didn't have that. So you have swords, you have all this mystique in having a sword rather than just having a gun.
Yeah. The kind of idea of like in Hogwarts they still use quill pens even though that's not super necessary. It's, that same idea.
But yet they have modern plumbing.
Yeah. It's like, oh, well, we like that part, but we're still going to use quills. Yeah, so I think the sword thing or the other ancient weapons that they have has to do with like this long-running tradition of the demigods using them too. Have you ever seen that gif of someone edited it to look like Harry Potter shoots Voldemort?
Oh yeah, it's like one of my favorite gifs in the world.
I think also the avoiding of like mortal weapons, at least modern mortal weapons. Yeah, I think the main reason why it's avoided though is because it would kind of remove you from the magic realism of the like Percy Jackson universe, and you'd be too like steeped in like the mortal element of like people who actually walk around and are a threat in a different way than magic people. It's like they have actual weapons and they're their own separate thing going on, but now we're way far into the fantastical of we're in the sea of monsters and there are actual islands filled with cyclopses and stuff. It would just be like kind of not congruous with the setting we're working with. Yeah, but I found this chapter really fun. It was incredibly short, but we did get a lot of stuff, a lot of information, a lot of exposition.
We got a lot of character moments, such as we get to see each person, as well as we have the ruse is up with Grover, which could have been played a lot longer to like the 11th hour. But here it just seems like appropriate because Clarice doesn't get the memo, and she's like spilling the beans on Grover.
Oh my god, that was so difficult to read when she's just like, oh yeah, after the chapters and chapters of dreams of Percy worrying about Grover and stressing out about this empathy link and he's gonna die and he's keeping up this whole facade of like being this Cyclops bride. At any minute it feels like he's gonna figure it out. And then all it takes is Clarice and her big mouth to just be like, oh, well, he's a satyr. Like, what could she possibly think that would do? How would that benefit her to reveal someone as a satyr to a Cyclops, like, other than her own, like, need to be right all the time and correct people, like, oh, of course that's Grover the satyr, you could eat him. Like, it's this weird impulse that she has to correct people even when it's, like, putting herself in danger.
I mean, it's kind of like the mixture of both she's arrogant and also she's very pig-headed, but also remember what her catchphrase is. Losers. So it's like the idea of I think in the moment, when she gets really aggressive, she kind of throws common sense out the window because one, she takes on Polyphemus by herself because her entire crew is dead, and two, it's a really comedic moment because she's literally dangling from a boiling pot. She's about to be mixed into like a goulash.
It totally sums up her chutzpah that she could be literally dangling over a fire about to be cooked by a Cyclops, and she still feels the need to correct him and put someone else in danger.
Which is really great. I love Clarice, actually. Like, she's like, I hate to say it, but she's like one of my favorite characters.
Yeah. Oh, she's hilarious. She's frustrating as heck. Of all the things that would reveal Grover's poorly slapped together disguise as a Cyclops bride, and it would be Clarice just saying it. Like, he's kept up this, like, facade for so long, and every minute we're worried that finally this Cyclops who, you know, isn't the brightest bulb in the drawer is gonna finally get the idea that this is not a Cyclops and it's actually a satyr, a delicious meal for him, and it doesn't go the way you think. I think that it also works comedically that way.
Like, it doesn't go the way you plan, except my favorite thing is the reverse they have, which is now Grover's going to be the feast, and Clarice is going to be marrying Polyphemus.
Yeah, the sort of, like, musical chairs they play with their roles. Like, oh, I was going to get married to him, and you were going to be dinner, but now it's kind of vice versa.
Which, you know what? I think that's a really great situational comedy where you have, like, the twist of she's so, like, aggressive and, like, she's perfect for a Cyclops.
Yeah, I love that she also, like, kind of dug her hole deeper. Like, not only did she put Grover in danger, but because she was so feisty and kind of combative to Polyphemus that he's like, oh, I like you. I like your can-do attitude because you're so rude and terrible to people. That's exactly my kind of girl. Yeah, there was a lot of comedy in this chapter, surprisingly, even though there was, like, a lot of dramatic tension. I mean, this is the chapter it's been led up to for chapters and chapters of all of the visions and the dreams of Percy being worried about what will happen to Grover and them trying to figure out where the Sea of Monsters is, what it is, what those numbers mean. There's tons of stuff leading up to this, and then it finally happens, and there's actually a lot of, like, slapstick humor involved.
Well, it kind of, like, subverts your expectations in having this situation because you would think it's, like, going to be this epic brawl and showdown, but then it just ends up being very slapsticky, almost like Charlie Chaplin-esque comedy. And having, okay, we're gonna have the first situation. We'll break down the beats real quickly. Is that they get to the island and they notice the first thing is the defense system because they can literally see the Golden Fleece, and all of a sudden
it's just hanging out.
We have the situation now where they see the Golden Fleece, like they're sailing on the Queen's and Revenge, and they see all these sheep just grazing and having a good time. Hey, B, you want to hear a joke?
Yeah.
Where does a sheep like to go on vacation?
Where does a sheep like to go on vacation? Where, Zach?
Baja, California.
You can't see me, but I'm shaking my head.
I'm smiling. And you have the setup and the payoff of having the setup is, oh, there's nothing harmless. We can see the Golden Fleece. It's too easy. And then all of a sudden, a deer just pops out like Bambi's. I'm sure it's Bambi's mom at this point. and like goes to like the middle of the field, and all of a sudden all these sheep just start attacking, like just having like a fur apocalypse.
Oh, it's so like gruesome and hilarious at the same time. And it's like almost to the level of like the grim dark happy tree friends type of humor of like, "Oh, it's so cute." And then, "Oh my god, what is happening?" And you just see a bunch of sheep swarm on a deer. Like what kind of horrifying scenario is that?
You know what I think this is based off of? I think it's based off of the rabbit scene in Monty Python and the Holy Grail.
Oh, I could definitely see that for sure. Where it's like you think that something's docile.
Because it's almost the exact same premise of having, it's just a rabbit. Look at the bones.
Yeah, it's the same premise, definitely.
Oh man, I love that scene, but here it's even better because it's no blood, no nothing. They literally pick it clean to be like a bleach white skeleton.
Oh god. It's so visceral. The description here is I'm just going to read the passage actually because it really sets a scene. Annabeth's eyes narrowed. There's supposed to be a guardian, a dragon, or that's when a deer emerged from the bushes. It trotted into the meadow, probably looking for grass to eat, and when the sheep all bleated at once and rushed the animal, it happened so fast that the deer stumbled and was lost in a sea of wool and trampling hooves. Grass and tufts of fur flew into the air. A second later, the sheep all moved away. Back to their regular peaceful wanderings. Where the deer had been was a pile of clean, white bones.
Oh my god, they even sun bleached the bones. These are some hardcore sheep.
How did they even do that? It's horrifying. It's so viscerally horrifying and hilarious at the same time.
Well, when you have a situation like this, which is, I call it whimsically scary, because you have situations like Happy Tree Friends, or you have something that's so like cutesy wootsy, and then you're like pulled back and you realize, oh my god, this is terrible. It's so great when you have that situation of having something that's so unexpected become so unexpected.
I think it only works when it's unexpected, though. If you keep having cute things be scary, then it loses its punch. And that's probably why Happy Tree Friends is one of those things that's funny like the first time you watch it, and then as you get older, you're like, I don't get why I found this funny. It comes from the bait and switch of being like, oh, it's just a gentle calm, oh my god, like that, it's that flipping of expectations that makes it funny, not necessarily the scenario, because once you're expecting it, then it's not as humorous.
It's the same way with like the Lightning Thief and having Echidna and the Chimera, and having the Chimera as an adorable chihuahua that slowly starts turning into this horrific monster. It's the bait and switch, which Percy Jackson does a really good job of doing that, of having like cutesy wootsy moments, and then it's like, oh my god, these are mythical monsters, be careful. And the one question that I have is, how does one train a bunch of sheep to become vicious, like bloodthirsty monsters?
I don't know. Yeah, it reminds me a little bit of oh god, what is that character's name from Hannibal who like feeds people to pigs? There's that element a little bit like, oh, I'm going to take these like normally docile farm creatures to eat people alive.
Oh, no. Pigs are not docile. If you don't feed them, they will literally eat anything.
Well, that's true. Pigs will eat whatever. That's true. Yeah, that's true. That's a little different than sheep.
But like, sheep are so adorable and like fuzzy wuzzy and like, oh my god, so many bas and the fleece. Oh my god, just
ba 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 ba
ba ba ba ba.
Yeah, it's good.
But that's what I like about this, is that they see it from afar, and all they know is Annabeth and Percy are just like, yeah, we're gonna like make like a nautical U-turn and just GTFO and go to the other side of the mountain.
Let's get out of here.
And that's where they discover that Clarice's lifeboat is on the beach. And that's like, oh, I guess she's here too. We might as well climb up the cliff and we'll probably be able to see Polyphemus's cave, because Percy Jackson still has that life link, and he's just like, my little boy senses are tingling.
Can I just say that the description of them climbing the cliff is so hilarious, like peak Rick Riordan dark sense of humor, where he says, we only came close to dying 6 or 7 times, which I thought was pretty good.
No, I like about this as well as they're describing, like, normally when you're writing something, you would say there's, again, shoe leather, like you wouldn't explain them going up the mountain. But here you explain them climbing up the cliff instead of like, we climbed up the cliff and we only died 6 or 7 times. Here it's like the joke is, Annabeth like slips a couple times and she lands on Percy's face. And there's like so many great jokes, especially the idea at the end of they got to the top and they are exhausted. Their arms are like molten lead.
And that's when they hear Polyphemus, that like in that moment. Finally, when my fingers felt like molten lead and my arm muscles were shaking from exhaustion, we hauled ourselves over the top of the cliff and collapsed. Ugh, I said. Ouch, moaned Annabeth. Gar, bellowed another voice.
Yes, and that's the one thing I think that Rick Riordan does a great job with, is when he writes Shoe Leather, he makes it really enjoyable rather than Percy and Annabeth climbed up the cliff and they were tired at the end. Here it's actually like sets up their characters because that's who they're still kids, so they're not going to have that much upper body strength to climb up a cliff by itself.
Even if they're demigods, but yeah. I do think that Rick Riordan is good at this kind of exposition because it doesn't feel like he's just trying to get to point A from point B, so he's just gonna like impulsively describe this thing the way, like in a really kind of bland, boring, descriptive way, but instead he decides to take that opportunity to make it humorous or to decide, okay, well, how would they feel when they're climbing the cliff? Which I thought was cool, that he took the opportunity to both give you a sense of like drama because, oh, this is like so painful and difficult for them, and also humor because Annabeth like steps on his face.
Yeah, because that's like one of the most clever things about this chapter is when you have that sense of, comedy, but also, hey, Annabeth is going to go first because she's the stronger climber, and then you have the comedy payoff of she steps on his face, and then they do all these things in a very humorous, comedic way, and then they get to the top and they're exhausted, but you know what? Their quest isn't over yet, and they hear Clarice go, Glarb, and like yell at the Cyclops like in a really fun way. They know what to do. They don't have to follow the screams. They just have to follow the shouts.
I love just the way that they kind of encounter Clarice in media res, like as she's dangling above this pot, and they're just like, it reminds me a lot of, I feel like there's a lot of cinematic scenes where main characters are sort of watching over a hill or something, seeing other characters interact with enemies, and they can't say anything because they'll reveal their position, and it presents like a lot of like funny observations because they can't tell Clarice to shut her stupid mouth and not tell Polyphemus that Grover is a satyr, but it's gonna happen.
But I like the build-up and payoff of that because we know who Clarice is, we have a clear understanding, so of course she's going to threaten, she's going to be very comedic in these moments, and I find that to be so clever and so funny because, again, you have the thing of just like, Clarice, just shut up. Just shut up. Oh my god, why aren't you shutting up? You're ruining the plan.
And they can't, the struggle and the pain of knowing that you're sort of in the same role as Annabeth and Percy, where you don't have the agency to tell Clarice to shut up, so you two are hiding in the shadows with them, like, please don't do it, Clarice, don't, please, and you're just watching in horror as you know she's going to because she can't keep her mouth shut.
Well, it's much like a train wreck that's happening, and it's just like you just have to let it happen because if you say something, all Hades is gonna break loose. And I think that's really clever because you have the thing of Polyphemus is really stupid to the point of where he has to be spelled out that Grover is a satyr rather than having the big reveal on the altar of just like, wait a second. Oh my god, I've been duped.
Literally, Clarice has to tell him over and over again. Like, not only does she slip up and say it once, but she's like, don't you understand? He's a satyr. Like, really making it fully clear to him that what has been going on the whole time because he's too slow to fully get what's happening.
And even, like, Clarice is too dumb to realize he should not be given this ruse up because literally Grover's saying, yeah, maybe we should wait on this. We'll have this for the wedding feast. We'll have an extra day on this. And Clarice is being so dense.
Yeah, and he was buying her more time. Like, that's what's so frustrating is if she just learned to be less of a know-it-all, basically, then she would have been in a better situation. And now she's the Cyclops bride, and Grover's slated to be dinner tonight. So nothing worked out the way she wanted.
This just seems like a preteen problem of, oh no, I'm going to be married to the Cyclops now, rather than being eaten.
No one ended up better than where they started, all because Clarice doesn't understand how to solve problems in a de-escalating way. She only knows how to escalate. She's like, oh, I want to fight. I have to, like, she can't stab a situation to make it better sometimes. Like, you can't just fight and yell your way out of every possible obstacle that you come across.
Clary seems like the type of person that is like, I'd like to speak to your manager, and then when she doesn't get what she wants, she's like, I'd like to speak to the owner. And then when that doesn't work, she's like, I'd like to speak to the president of the company.
Yeah, she would be a terrible customer, for sure. Yeah. The slightest inconvenience and she would fly into a rage. She is Aries' daughter, so it's like, that makes sense.
Yeah, but then we have like the sense of like it's unfair because Clarice is this very complicated person because we've seen like how she's treated in front of Aries and kind of when she is pigheadedness, it's just like it's her defense mechanism, same as how some people are like sarcastic or funny when like they're stressed out. Like I'm sure she's like terrified because literally she's digging from a boiling pot of water.
Right, but that's her defense mechanism, is to seem like she's not scared, because that's the Aries kind of way. I really love when she realizes the mistake she's made, and Grover says, but you're still getting married? Who's the bride? Polyphemus looked toward the boiling pot. Clarice made a strangled sound. Oh no, you can't be serious. I'm not. She's like, oh, great, I've kind of dug my hole deeper, haven't I? Yeah,
this is why I love Clarice as a character. I've actually always have liked Clarice. This is like my confession now is that like she's like the typical like response you would get from most of these situations, especially. She's not stupid. She just is very like, I guess, narrow-minded in the sense of she's got tunnel vision, and then she realizes what's wrong, and then it's almost like reality crashes right down onto her.
Grover and Clarice are kind of opposites in a lot of ways, because Clarice can't help but talk herself into things and escalate things, while Grover is really great at smooth-talking and getting out of stuff, because that's what he's been doing for weeks at a time, lying about being this Cyclops bride, and then, even after it's revealed that he's a satyr, he once again comes to the rescue and goes, oh, well, why would you eat me raw? You can cook me and have mango chutney. And the Cyclops is just dumb enough to kind of fall for this very not great plan.
Yeah, because we can get to Grover right now and how like the ruse is up, but yet Grover figures out a way of like, oh, you don't want to eat me raw. If you eat me raw, you're gonna get like E. coli or like I don't even know, like the runs almost.
Yeah, the description of he's like, oh well, I mean, surely I'd be more delicious if you had me this way, which is definitely kind of more of like a Bilbo Baggins style of getting out of trouble, of just kind of saying a clever, weird thing, and then the monster's so confused that while they're confused, you escape.
No, because in The Hobbit, they actually have the same situation where it's the three trolls are gonna like cook all the dwarves and Bilbo just has to wait until the sun comes up, because then they'll turn to stone. So he's like, oh, no, you don't eat us this way. Here, I'm going to give you like a nice recipe, like a very English recipe on how to cook us.
Yeah, it totally is like a similar thought process of being like, okay, well, here's like this kind of behemoth type of monster who's not that bright, and I'm clever and not as strong, and if I say the right things, I might befuddle them just enough to buy myself some time to escape.
Actually, the very similar thing of having, oh, you don't want to eat us, we're like filled with like worms and nastiness in The Hobbit. Here it's like, you'll get E. coli and salmonella.
I wonder if Rick Riordan was thinking of that scene when he wrote this.
That is a possibility, but then again, that's a scene that's very, very like steeped in mythology of having like a creature that eats people. I think it happens in the Odyssey as well in the situation. Where it's the idea of, Polyphemus isn't the smartest bulb in the hardware store, but...
He's not the smartest bulb anywhere.
But you still have the situation of having, again, with Grover, he's like, I'm going to give you this really awesome recipe. We're going to make mango chutney. And Polyphemus thinks with his stomach, he's like, oh my god, that sounds amazing. I'm going to get mangoes. What's a mango? Like, he doesn't even know what he's going to make.
Yeah, that line was so funny when he's just like, oh, mangoes, yeah. And then he walks out and it's like, mangoes, Polyphemus grumbled to himself. What are mangoes? Even though he's been living on this island that supposedly grows them.
Yeah, which is really funny. And it's the idea of like getting like blinker fluid. Like, hopefully this island doesn't have mangoes. And I think that's really clever when you have it. Like, B, do you have any mango chutney recipes? Because I know how much you like your chutney.
I've never made it actually. That's a lie. No, I've made mango chutney before. I was gonna say I normally get the jarred stuff, but no, I've made it before. It's pretty simple, really. Just like chopped up mangoes and spices. You just chop up mangoes and you put it in a pot with spices and you cook it down a little bit so the natural juices and the pectin make it more of a jelly.
Num num num. More of a jam person than a chutney person.
Well, chutney's more often served with savory things like meats and stuff. The more you know. I should just have a supplementary cooking podcast to this one.
Well, we could do it together because there's like a lot of things. Because I'm good at baking, I'm just not good at prep cooking.
There was something about going to the Sheep and Wool Festival and walking by the stand where they sold roast lamb that was a little bit sick.
Like right next to the
because I was like, I was petting you moments ago.
Oh, it's so fresh. It's like literally so is the bow.
Yeah, we just slaughtered them. Yeah, it's kind of dark.
We have Mary's little lamb if you like some of that.
Which is funny because also Percy says that he wants to become a vegetarian after all of this.
Which is good on him, but I mean, for me, I could never become a vegetarian. I like meat too much.
Oh yeah, I know. But I think he's mostly joking because of like the experience of him turning into a guinea pig. But then he's like, after watching too many grotesque scenarios of flesh being eaten, I think I'm good. I'll stick to the veggies.
Oh no, until he meets like a plant villain. He's just like, you know what? Meat's good. I like meat. Yes, yes, yes. No, no, no.
Well, this goes back to your point of how did Polyphemus train the sheep to be carnivorous and to swarm on people, and then it's like the description of him with his big basket of quote-unquote mystery meat feeding the sheep. So that's like his weird training scenario of getting them used to eating flesh, which is dark and creepy on many levels. Does he also eat sheep, though? So he raises them and then eats some of them? Is that how it works? Because some of them are docile and normal, and some of them are man-eating. They're like a separate breed.
Well, because you got to remember, because there's the part where he's talking about like the sheep that Percy's on. He's just like, man, you've gotten real fat. You're a real plumper. I'll have you for breakfast.
And then we'll eat you. Yes, that's true. So he raises some for protection and some for dinner.
He's the equivalent of someone that's obsessed with like Big Macs, but yet still works at McDonald's.
Yeah, he's kind of diversified his flock, so half of them are man-eating, half of them are his snack.
Oh my god, it's so crazy when you think about it. This is a kid's story, but yet we can go into like nauseating detail on a man's love for sheep, because you know what? Polyphemus has an adorable hobby, because sheep are majestic creatures.
But then he devours them.
Well, I mean, most things are like that. Isn't that like... I know people that used to own like a pig, and when it died of old age, they ate it.
Yeah. Oh, it's like that Simpsons scene where he has the
the lobster?
The Pinchy, what is it? The lobster named Pinchy, and then he accidentally cooks it in the bath, and he's eating it all by himself, crying, eating the enormous lobster. Like, Pinchy, I loved you.
Well, I mean, to be fair, that you would do that in that situation. You're like, I'm not going to let this food go to waste.
I mean, hey, free lobster, you know? So after all of this, Percy and Annabeth need to think of something to get Grover and Annabeth. Now they've bought a little bit of time, but they're trapped behind an enormous boulder.
And now the main problem that they have is that Clarice is going to be married at sundown. So now, again, we have another clock. It's not just we have to get to this thing on the certain day. Now we're down to like the last wee hours of the day. And now we're like really getting into like a time crunch as, you know, they're trapped underneath this rock. And they're trying to figure out, like, oh, what should we do? Well, if we do kind of like what happened in the myth with Odysseus and we kind of trick, you know, good old Polyphemus, we can actually, like, beat the situation, like, nip it in the butt. Annabeth is going to be the one to do this because she is the smartest and she knows what to do. And also, the most important thing, she has her cap of invisibility.
Yeah, that's an important detail.
Again, I hate to use Harry Potter, but having Annabeth with, like, an invisibility hat and Perry with the invisibility cloak are, like, very, very, like... Yeah, they come into, like, great situations. Pretty much being invisible is a very universal thing to get you out of any problem.
It's a useful thing, yeah. It's helpful in stealth, which also plays into the whole... Any kind of scene where they're not overtly using violence in any way, or they're just having a straightforward fight, the invisibility hat really does come in handy because they have to be stealthy when normally they're just like, let's fight.
So then all of a sudden you just hear as Annabeth starts mocking Polyphemus to the point of where it's like, hey, dummy, it's me, nobody. I hate you, nobody. I've always hated you, even though it's been like 2,000 years and Odysseus is clearly dead. Like, super dead. Like, super uber
Yeah,
dead.
well, again, we've established he doesn't exactly understand pretty much anything. He's not a smart guy, and he's blind, so he can't even really physically take in the world around him, and he's gullible.
And yet he doesn't understand that instead of a man's voice, it's a woman's voice.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of reasons why he's easily tricked, but Annabeth is definitely way above his caliber as far as cleverness.
I'm sure Annabeth could be like, hey, Polyphemus, do you know that your picture's in the dictionary? It's under gullible? And he actually would probably look.
I doubt he would even understand what a dictionary is.
Oh, he has a sheep dictionary. It's all in sheep language. It just goes, bah. It's a Basaurus.
I did another head shake in your honor.
So then what happens is Polyphemus gets so mad that he literally picks up the giant rock that's blocking the door and throws it in the wrong direction. Thus, there's no more door. Except the main thing is Percy has to get to save Clarice and Grover. So what he does is he kind of attaches himself to the bottom of a sheep.
He hitches himself a ride.
Which, you know what?
I love this weird logic. Like, it's very video game logic, isn't it? To, like, I'm gonna hide in a sheep. I'm going to attach myself to the fluffy underside of a sheep.
That was actually one of the things that Odysseus did to get out of the cave with Polyphemus, is they all attached themselves underneath the bellies of the sheep. They went out to graze, and they were able to escape and then get to their ship.
So there's a lot of references happening here that I'm not getting because I didn't read the original story.
I like the story, but just imagine, like, being in the underbelly of a sheep either is, like, the most saddest or most, like, the most warm feeling in the world. You're just hugging a sheep.
Well, his description is that it smells like a dirty old sweater, basically.
It just so musty. Oh, so must. Like, it's so musty, and the way to describe it is, like, the sheep is just covered in, like, filth. And, like, Percy Jackson just holding on to this sheep for dear life as it's, like, waddling into the cave. And it's really adorable because all the sheep have different names, and I love it.
Yeah, I love all the names. It reminds me a lot of how, what is he called? The Ice King in Adventure Time? He has all the names for the penguins, and they're all variations of Gunther. Gunter. Gunter.
The adorable names that he gives to all the sheep are like total names that you would give to like pets, and it's adorable. Like, he's got like Hassenpfeffer,
Yeah,
Einstein, and Widget. Widget's the one that Percy's riding on. And again, Polyphemus is such an idiot. He doesn't realize there's a small boy underneath it as he's picking up the sheep to inspect them, and he just realizes that Widget's just a lot fatter. Like, oh man, you're like putting on some weight. You're getting in to be like a real chubby sheep.
You're gonna be delicious.
And I'll have you for breakfast. I almost feel bad for him. Like, you can't be this stupid and like walk through life this way.
Yeah, well, luckily he's on an island surrounded by man-eating sheep, so he's kind of protected a little bit. But yeah, it almost feels like an unfair fight because he's so gullible.
But I guess that's the point of, like, he has all the strength but no brains. Like, even when you look at Cyclops, it's like, let's look at Tyson. Tyson's a lot smarter than Polyphemus.
He is. He definitely is. So is there some sort of inverse relationship where the more, like, terrifying and strong a Cyclops is, the less intelligent they are? Or is this just, like, a character trait he happens to be that way?
I'm sure it's more of a character trait, but it's also the idea of Tyson did actually go to school for a year.
That's true. He did. And he, like, went to Camp Half-Blood and everything. Yeah. Well, Polyphemus has been living on an island for thousands of years.
But yet he's still articulate enough to go to SheepCon.
Yeah, that's true. I basically went to SheepCon yesterday.
Oh my! I just imagine going to a convention, just like an actual like New York Comic Con, just filled with sheep.
Yeah, that would be a smelly place.
And then Percy Jackson is in the cave as Polyphemus is going out to hunt nobody, and he saves Grover and Clarice because Clarice is an idiot. But my favorite thing about this is that Grover's trying to like help Clarice because she's tied up, and he's trying to break her out with like safety scissors. Like, when I'm thinking of like safety scissors, I'm thinking of like the plastic ones that just don't cut whatsoever.
The plastic ones that couldn't even cut a piece of yarn. Do you remember the frustration of being a child in like pre-K and you weren't even allowed to have like the normal safety scissors, but it literally was just like the vaguely sharp pieces of plastic you use to cut construction paper, and you get one shot at that because once you cut into the construction paper and you make it not like crisp factory, like have that crisp factory texture, if you try to go back, there's no way you're going to cut through it with those horrible safety scissors. It was an endlessly frustrating experience.
I know what you're talking about, and I hate those things because they're stupid, but as an adult, what really grinds my gears?
What?
You have to open up scissors now with scissors.
With scissors. It's like if I had scissors, I wouldn't have
Please
purchased
tell me,
them.
you've been in that situation where you've had to buy a new pair of scissors, and you buy them and they have like this bubble pack, and it's like, well, I guess I can't use these scissors now.
Kind of a real hole in the bucket situation, dear Liza.
But of course, Percy Jackson has Riptide, so he like slices through that rope just like butter and saves Clarice and Grover. And Grover's so happy to see his best friend, the person he put an illegal empathy link on, so if he were to die, Percy Jackson would have been a vegetable.
You're my pal. You'll die with me. Okay. Thanks.
We're blood brothers. I don't want to be blood brothers.
Too late. It's happened.
One of my favorite things always has been reuniting with friends, especially in books, and there's a lot of like a distance, and then you finally meet again with Grover and Percy, and they have like a hug. They have like a total bro moment, and I love that about this because, I knew you were going to come for me. I knew you were just going to rescue.
It's so cute that like he has to immediately jump out. It's really cute. He's like, Percy, Grover bleated and tackled me with a goat hug. You heard me, you came. Yeah, buddy, I said. Of course I came. Aw. A friendship for the ages. It's adorable.
It's like one of those most adorable things I love about this is that, there's a sense of like friendship rather than, oh my god, you're here, let's get out of here.
But then, of course, then they have to collect themselves and go, oh wait, there's no time to talk. Of course, we have to escape the lair of the Cyclops that you've been captured by.
And Clarice is just mad, like, I'm going to be a Cyclops bride and all these things. And she doesn't even she doesn't even thank Percy for like saving him. She's just like, come on, loser, let's go. I had this all under control.
Yeah, she definitely does that very specific Clarice thing of not being willing to admit that she messed up, but then sort of sheepishly, pun intended, saying thanks to him like, oh, well, yeah, I guess you did rescue me, huh, you idiot who I hate, but you did, come and save me and Grover when I really kind of got us into this situation to begin with.
Yes, and as they're reuniting, they hear a scream from outside, and it's coming from Annabeth. Dun, 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 and the chapter ends.
And that's how it ends, on a cliffhanger. Yeah, it was a short one, but a lot happened.
Yeah, it's when you come to think of it, especially like how we like review our books, is that we try to find different things to talk about rather than talking about the plot, because I think it benefits both our show to have like, well, we can talk about these little interesting little moments rather than talking about the big picture. You can take your time, sit down, and like look at them climbing the walls and talking about the sheep and then talking about how stupid Polyphemus is. I think that's like really important when it comes to like analyzing books is, hey, it's okay to have a big picture moment, but if you can find the little small nuggets, it becomes adorable. It's like having the world's biggest chicken nugget, but really all you want is those dinosaur chicken nuggies.
Yeah, this was a jam-packed chapter. I mean, it's basically been leading up to this moment for a long time. It doesn't go down the way you expect, for sure. It's not as grand and epic as you think. But again, we still have all the stuff to tackle with next chapter because Annabeth has clearly been captured.
Well, nothing ever goes according to plan, especially when it comes to like endings of books, because we still have like a fat bunch of this book left.
Yeah, there's still a lot of pages left. We still have to reckon with Luke, and with Kronos possibly being brought back to life, and with Tantalus taking over the camp. Remember that Chiron was fired and that, like, he might die because of it, so there's a lot of stuff we still need to deal with.
Yes, and a lot's going to be happening soon, because we're about 15 chapters into this, and we're very close to the end, almost. We have like 100 pages next. So in another like 10 months, we'll be finished with this book.
Yeah, we'll finally be done with the second book.
And then we get to the third book, which is my absolute favorite out of all of them. Actually, The Lightning Thief is my favorite, but Titan's Curse is my second favorite.
I'm looking forward to that.
So, B, what is the name of the next chapter?
The next chapter is chapter 15, Nobody Gets the Fleece. Oh, Rick Riordan and your clever titles.
What do you think that's supposed to mean? As I'm like giving the biggest like Cheshire grin right now.
That could mean literally nobody gets the fleece, in which case they're able to escape probably, but they don't get the fleece in time and they come back to get it or something along those lines. Or it means that Annabeth gets it because she called herself nobody in the way that Odysseus did to trick Polyphemus. It could be either. Of course he named it that. At first when I read the chapter title, I was like, oh, well, he revealed the ending. Annabeth gets it. But I forgot, of course, that nobody could just literally mean nobody.
Yeah, that could be an interesting like plot twist. Ooh. And you know what? We have this whole situation. So what's going to happen? Do you think that Annabeth has been caught, or what do you think is going to be going down next chapter?
Oh, geez. I mean, they're going to try to rescue Annabeth. And now that they have the three of them, they might be able to take him on. I feel like some cleverness might happen with the man-eating sheep a little bit. I don't exactly know how they're going to maybe try to use them against him somehow, or I don't know. I don't know how they're going to get to where the fleece is. I know that there's going to be some sort of showdown happening of like them trying to distract him and trick him to get him away from Annabeth, but yeah, I have a feeling that it's not like they're gonna, like, everything's gonna be lost and they're gonna be recaptured or something. Like, either they're gonna get away but not get the fleece, or they're gonna do both, and then it's the rest of the book is gonna be more about them dealing with not losing it or, like, keeping it on their quest to get back to Camp Half-Blood and deal with all of the other plot threads, which I mentioned earlier. But that's generally what I'm thinking is gonna happen. I don't know what the specifics are gonna be.
When it comes to the chapter names, I've always found them to be both leading and misleading at the exact same time. Especially, it gives you a nice jumping on point for the chapters, and I think that's really what I find to be the most unique of Rick Riordan, is he comes up with the most clever names for the chapters, and I love that, especially when you have the situations of now Grover, Clarice, and Percy all have to work together, possibly to save Annabeth. And I think that's such an interesting dynamic, because when it comes to like Annabeth, she is the daughter of strategy.
I definitely see that, where it's like they're going to have to finally figure out a plan without their plan maker, because that's what Annabeth does. She thinks before she acts. Well, Clarice is pure instinct, and then Grover has his, like, other, like, he's sort of a smooth-talking, like, way of coping with scenarios like we talked about earlier. And then Percy's like, oh, well, I have a sword, so how are they going to use all of those sort of strengths and weaknesses to try and save her?
Yeah, there's a lot of things that are going to be happening, and I love that about when you have different mashups of characters coming together, like things that you would unlikely see, because it makes for the more interesting dynamics. I've always found to have, if you switch it up in that extent, it actually helps and benefits the story by having those different types of team-ups, and I'm really excited to see what's going to be happening next chapter. So, B, did we get any messages this week?
We got an email from Chloe, who says, hey, I'm the one who sent that one weird review, aka Chloe. About that review, I'm glad you laughed, because it was supposed to be a joke about fangirls and how they will ship anything and everything. Also a little explanation for the fan art below. The concept is that B is dressed as Pfeffernuss. I probably spelt that wrong. It's fine, it's German and you did your best. And Zach is Rosie. I have a bit of a hunch that Zach takes Halloween a bit too seriously. I love your podcast. From Chloe.
Fun fact, it's actually the exact opposite. B takes Halloween more seriously than I do.
Yeah, I take Halloween way more seriously, for sure. I mean, you like horror and stuff, but I'm the kind of person who makes a cheese ball shaped like a pumpkin. That's my kind of life.
Well, for me, I love horror, but every day for me is Halloween, rather than you, Halloween is Halloween. I'm just like, I'll pop on like The Nightmare Before Christmas, or I'll pop on like any Halloween movie like during July and still feel Halloween-y.
Yeah, so the picture says Happy Halloween, and it's me, just like what it says on the tin, dressed as a hedgehog, saying, you got a fursuit? Yeah, you're dressed as Rosie, and you're like whimsically smiling and saying, yep, I am. I love like the sort of erased bubbles in the background, like you could see that at one point Y was written in my bubble.
I'm trying to see like the other one is. I think it's like, actually it's like comfortable. I like how it's like adorable. It's like,
it's a very cute drawing. It's hilarious.
I like how it's like a dog outfit, even though like Rosie, my dog, is a Shih Tzu, so she's got like stubby legs. I call her Nubs. I love this picture.
Yeah. You look more like a dog than Rosie in this picture.
No, like for you, what you're doing, we'll post all these pictures up, but it's like, for you, what you're doing is like a very like action, like kung fu pose, like you're about ready to like throw hands at me.
I am. Yeah, it looks like I'm about to throw down. Oh, that's so great. Our fan art is unparalleled. It's really great. Everything that you guys send in, I love.
Honestly, I just want to get this all framed and then just post it up on our wall. Thank you so much. We love and we really appreciate when people send in fan mail, because you know what? It's kind of like a little bit of like a pep boost for us, like throughout the week. It's like, oh man, look at all this cool stuff that people send us and how much we really love that you guys take the time to send us these messages, and when you hear what we have to say about certain things, and having that connection really is important to us, because it's a little bit of a pep boost, because, you know, sometimes we might be having like a stressful day or something and we see it and it just brightens our day, and we really appreciate that. So thank you everybody for that.
Did we get any other messages or reviews this week?
So we did get one iTunes review this week, and it says the caption is, "Need this." This is from Ashley 2.0 from Australia. I feel like if I'm going to do this, I have to do this like
in a Valley Girl voice.
In like a Valley Girl voice. Oh my god, like this is so good, guys. If you were wondering, I'm from Apollo Cabin, and I'm a Hufflepuff, and I love it so much. Like a bunch of like heart emojis. Edit. Love you guys, but I have two questions. One, Loki or Thor? And what is your Hogwarts house? Okay, so when it comes to like Loki and Thor, are we talking about like Marvel, or we're talking about like
the
actual mythology?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know either super well, but I know the Marvel universe just from many a gif set on the tumble.com.
So here's the problem though, it's like, if we're talking about Thor 1 and 2, it has to be Loki. But if we're talking about like Thor Ragnarok, it's Thor.
Yeah, I don't know enough about the Marvel universe. I mean, I kind of... I'm fed up with the grimdark deal that Loki's doing. I kind of like the affable golden retriever nature of Thor, so I'm going to say Thor.
So do you want him to be like Labrathor?
A Labrathor retriever.
Thank you. I'll be here all night.
Yeah. Thank goodness. Didn't we get another iTunes review, though? Yeah.
B, what is our Hogwarts house?
My Hogwarts house is Hufflepuff, for sure.
Hufflepuff? Oh, man, I'm a Ravenclaw.
Yeah, well, that makes sense. I mean, I have Ravenclaw elements to me, but I definitely think I'm a Hufflepuff. I love food. I love being cozy. Plants are great. I'm kind of a low conflict kind of person. I'm a Hufflepuff.
For me, I think the reason why I'm a Ravenclaw is I'm very like inquisitive and I like researching things.
Yeah, I relate to Hufflepuffs because they value friendship, and that's how I feel.
So we actually did get one more iTunes review. It just happened like today. So it's from V, and it says, "My favorite. I love this podcast so much. It makes my day whenever a new one comes out. I really appreciate the way the Percy Jackson books are examined under more literature-based lenses rather than a fandom one. I'm so excited for the rest of the series." From V.
What a nice review. That's exactly what we're going for.
That is exactly what we're going for, because you know what? I've listened to a lot of podcasts where people like look at it from a fandom perspective, and the problem with those is they talk about all the things they want to talk about, and then they run out of content really quickly, rather than like, I'm a huge fan of these books, and slowly getting into this, and we're trying to find like a common ground. Even for me, as a huge fan of these books, I'm trying to find more of like a high ground almost of like, I want to look at these books from as a fan, but also as someone that appreciates literature, and kind of like figuring out, why do I love these books so much?
I definitely think doing the podcast has made me more of a fan, though. I went in kind of skeptical because I didn't know what to think, and I thought that it might be, even though I'm someone who reads YA all the time and appreciates it, a lot of that YA is stuff that I liked when I was younger, so I was wondering how I would react to the Percy Jackson series, but I can genuinely say that I've become a fan, and that might have to do with going like chapter by chapter and really analyzing what Rick was trying to do as far as representation and allusions to other types of literature and that kind of thing. I've really gained an appreciation for his writing and for these characters, and I consider myself a fan, and I don't know when that happened. I don't know the moment where I went from someone who does a Percy Jackson podcast who's learning about this series to someone who would be like, yeah, I'm a fan, but it just sort of happened.
And it's really cool that I got to hang out with my friend Zach. Wow, thanks, B. I really appreciate that. Aw, thank you.
I mean, that's true. I mean, I would talk to you anyway if we didn't do a podcast, but it is a good excuse to talk to you about stuff.
But I think the great thing about Rick Riordan's work is there's such a vast body of it, and every book is not the same. You can't compare this book to the first book because they're very different in tone, in style, and plot. Yeah. Rather than they're doing it again, because a lot of times I'm looking at this from movie terms and having when you do a sequel, it's the same movie, but this is a different setting. Such as, do you know in the late 80s, early 90s, when you wanted to do a Die Hard clone, what would you do, B? How would you pitch a Die Hard clone?
I don't know, it's an action movie and there's a grizzled guy has a storied past. I don't know.
So what you would say is, you would go in, I have this idea for Die Hard in an ice rink, or Die Hard on a subway, or Die Hard in an old west town. That's how you would pitch a Die Hard clone.
That's the thing about Rick Riordan's books is he doesn't just change the setting and then have the general same plot. It feels like he's really putting effort into keeping things new and fresh and exciting while still having the same old characters that you know and love. But they also have character development, so they're not stagnant. There's a lot of things that he's juggling, but he does a good job of it.
Yes, and I mean, before this, he had written an adult book series, so he's taking all those elements that he learned, rather than this is his debut novel and book series, and I'm going to learn while I'm going along. No, this was the person has honed his craft and applying what he learned as an adult writer to being a children's author, and I like that, especially when it comes to Rick Riordan as a person. I think this is if you gave this to another person, they would have done it wrong because of, one, he was a teacher that taught all this stuff. He understands how a kid thinks, and also he's a dad himself, so he can understand, trying to watch a movie. I'll give you an example. When I saw Goosebumps 2 this weekend, I was groaning because I knew the person that wrote this movie was a 40 to 50-year-old man and trying to figure out how kids these days talk. Has no idea, what a kid talks like.
Hello, fellow youths. Yeah, you could tell when people they don't actually know young people, but they're trying to, parrot what young people say. Well, I think because Rick Riordan is a teacher and a father and he pays attention, that he there's a sincerity to the way that he writes children that is not condescending but also not lionizing, where it's every child is super smart and they're tiny adults and they don't have these kind of developmental problems that children have of being unwarrantedly jealous or being kind of petulant in some ways. That there is still that element, and he understands that, but he also gives them credit where it's due. And I like the way that he writes children. I think it's a very sincere balance of, imagine that children are people. It's almost as if they're not just, angels or demons, Yeah, there's definitely a way that people look at children as either sort of little creatures of destruction, or they're perfect and can do no wrong and are innocent in every way. But if you're a teacher or a parent, you definitely know that that's not true.
Or then you have the Village of the Damned type of situation where they're the delightful children from down the lane, where it's just "Bah," says the lamb says "bah." Well, time to go into the playroom, and they hop on their little hobby horse, and then they just sit there.
Yeah, Rick Riordan's great. I've grown to really appreciate his writing in a way that I didn't anticipate. I didn't think that he was as astute, I guess, in his observations of how kids act and feel.
Well, B, there is an old-timey saying. You want to know what that is?
What?
Don't judge a book by its cover.
Yeah, that's true. I never thought that Percy Jackson was going to be terrible, but there is that impulse in children's media, I think, where people are oh, I'll write a children's book. There's any kind of Joe Schmo off the street believes that they can make media for children because kids are dumb and you can kind of give them whatever cutesy schlock you can think of and they'll eat it up because they're not smart enough to know that it's bad.
Actually, I find it more challenging to write a young adult book or a children's book rather than an adult fiction, because there's so many different elements to put into it as well. It's how do you not talk down to kids? How do you do all these things? Rather than an adult book, you can actually have a character that insults people. You can have a character that kind of talks down to people. Rather than here, it's you're kind of like talk up.
Right. You have to balance that didactic nature, too, of being like, oh, what am I teaching kids, or whatever. But at the same time, it's like, oh, well, I can't teach them too much, because then if I talk down to them and try to teach them moralistic lessons, then that's also condescending. And there's a lot of reasons why it's really difficult to make YA good. And also a lot of reasons why there's a lot of YA that's very bad.
Yes, and actually the most popular, like, YA actually is the most best-selling. Look at Harry Potter. Look at Goosebumps. Look at Chronicles of Narnia. Look at all these things. These are the things that, like, make the most money. Because they teach lessons and they're so ingrained in the culture that it's very, very important to have. That's why when it comes to Percy Jackson, if you go to a Barnes & Noble, they have a whole shelf just devoted to it. It's not just one separate thing. Like, kids love this to the point of where they stock it up to the point of, like, it's filling to the brim. Where can they find you, B?
You can find me on Tumblr at twinpoetry.tumblr.com, and you can find me on Twitter at @bkellygorman.
And if you want to find me, you can find me on Twitter at Suda41. That's SUDA41. If you want to follow our show, you can follow us at RadioCampHalfBlood@gmail.com. You can send us any amazing little videos, emails, or anything in between. And if you guys love our show, you could donate to our Patreon /Radio Camp Half-Blood, and you can buy shirts at B. Where can we find our shirts? Because I always get this wrong.
It's on TeePublic. Yeah, you could just search for Radio Camp Half-Blood on TeePublic, and you can get our lovely cartoon faces on your torso. And it'll be also a really soft shirt. Or you can get it on a mug, or a tote bag, or a phone case, I think. Pretty much anything.
This episode is also sponsored by Puffin Books UK. You can get 9 from the 9 Worlds, an excellent romp through Norse mythology, available now in hardback, ebook, and audiobook. Join all your favorite peeps from Hotel Valhalla as they go through the whimsical world of the 9 Worlds, such as Alex, Halfborn, Blitzen, TJ, and many, many, many more people as they take a ride through the 9 Worlds. A great gift for the holiday season. I think that kind of like wraps up the show, B. I'm Zach.
I'm B.
Oh my god, there's a gigantic sheep in my room. I'm gonna go touch
Oh god.
it. Oh my god, I'm swarming, B. Oh my god. Bye.